So we're going to switch now, and my next questions are for Steve, who I see from your bio that you're actually an alum of the college. So welcome back. And Steve, my first question for you is, who is David Ruggles?
My goodness. In many ways, it depends on which David Ruggles we're talking about. The 17-year-old that left, having been inspired by his mother, Nancy Ruggles, to become an entrepreneur and business person and have a life of his own. Was lucky enough to get a good education when he was a kid down in Connecticut, in Norwich, I guess, I don't know. And went off to New York City to find his life. And his life, after a brief stint as a mariner, he started his own grocery store and sold butter and natural goods. He was a natural from the get-go. He sold healthier stuff. Okay. And I want to read one little piece because there's been so much written over the years about Ruggles, and so little of it has come down in a way until Graham Hodges' book, and now there's like a flood. But his own voice is one I want people to be able to hear. So in that grocery store, he started a reading room for African Americans who had been excluded for the most part from libraries and other places to get education about what was going on. So he wanted to have a place the African Americans could come. So I'm just going to read his ad quickly from 1834, the anti-slavery bookstore, because that was the next step, was to open his own bookstore. This is David Ruggles, the bookseller. 67 Lispenard Street near Broadway. The subscriber offers for sale at the above establishment anti-slavery publications of every description, wholesale and retail. Also school books and stationery, prints, etc., cheap for cash. Letterpress and job printing, bookbinding and picture framing will be neatly executed. All orders will be thankfully received and punctually attended to. All orders must be cashed, and all communications must be postpaid. So he was a serious businessman at a young age there. He was probably 24 at the time. And then the following years, his activism on behalf of those being kidnapped in New York, and also those who had escaped slavery and needed a helping hand. He became the founding secretary of the New York Vigilance Committee. I was reading Eric Foner's section on Ruggles last night, which I would encourage people to look at his Underground Railroad book, because Ruggles was a hands-on, practical abolitionist. And Frederick Douglass's case is not untypical of Ruggles' MO, let's call it. Douglass came up in 1838, not knowing where to live, and found David Ruggles. And in his biography, in his first autobiography, really quickly, he talks about having been found by Ruggles and steered to him. Thank heaven I remained but a short time in this distressed situation. I was relieved from it by the human hand of Mr. David Ruggles, whose vigilance, kindness, and perseverance I shall never forget. I am glad of an opportunity to express, as far as words can, the love and gratitude I have for him. Mr. Ruggles is now afflicted with blindness and is himself in need of the same kind offices which he was once so forward in performance of toward others. And he goes on and he talks about Ruggles arranging for his fiancée, Anna, to come up from Maryland, and they were married in his apartment on Lispenard Street. So it's a very rich story, one that's told very well in David Blight's new biography of Frederick Douglass. But so as a leader of the New York Vigilance Committee, he is said to have helped over 600 formerly enslaved escapees to freedom along the Underground Railroad. And in fact, Foner kind of talks about Ruggles as an example of the classic Underground Railroad, where people find their way to assistance. Or in Ruggles' case, like I said, very hands-on. He found out quickly that Douglass was a ship's caulker and sent him to New Bedford instead of Canada, where he thought he was likely to go. And think how things could have been different for Douglass had he been with anyone else, rather than with William Lloyd Garrison sailing off to Nantucket, and the rest was history, where they had this anti-slavery convention out on Nantucket of all places. So he was so bold in his beliefs that he would do, so bold that he would board ships and apprise any former slaves there, or slaves that were brought to New York, that they could now be free because they'd been there 9 months. He would he would knock on slave owners' doors and make sure he got a chance to talk to the slaves they had brought to New York. For all of this, he was so far out on the extreme of activism that he ran afoul of some of his colleagues, and was really, he had to resign from the Vigilance Committee. He started to get very sick. This caused a lot of stress on him. And he was, as we'll find out, was bled and taught, and used, they used many different kinds of poisonous, really, medicines to try and help him. Quickly, I can't say, you see, this is the problem. You can't talk too quickly about David Ruggles, but I want to get him up to Northampton. Lydia Mariah Child, who I encourage people to look into, became editor of the National Anti-Slavery Standard, was a friend of Hopper, Isaac Hopper, who was a friend of Ruggles, and she told him that he should come to the Northampton Association of Education and Industry in Florence to recoup his health, which he did. And in a self-administered program of water cure, hydropathic techniques, he nursed himself back to health in 18 months. And by 1844, by August of 1844, let's say, he had organized for the first time African Americans, formerly enslaved citizens in Northampton, to have a Black rally, where Sojourner Truth, who arrived in 1844 at the Northampton Association, gave her first anti-slavery speech. So it's a big story of David Ruggles when you think about the fact that when he came to the association in November of 1842, he was likely the best known abolitionist around. And here he came to Northampton, where Lydia Mariah Child had made quite a splash, I must say, and with her Garrisonian principles. But so think of it. Sojourner Truth gave her first speech here. It was with Ruggles at a rally. Frederick Douglass came here before he had published his slave narrative. And was indeed here 1 month before he did publish it, having his portrait painted. So I'm going to just wrap it up a little bit. We have the Hutchinson family singers. I do want to mention a thing about them quickly, but I asked Graham Hodges, who who wrote this biography, which I encourage people to look up. Okay, this is the biography, the only one extensive biography of Ruggles. I asked him if he knew whether Ruggles listened to choral music. I wanted to find out, you know, what was his story with his ears, because he was many times pretty blind, and he would go in and out of degrees of blindness while he was here. But I do want to read this because, again, this is his voice in a different setting than his advertising as a businessman. Having retreated for health and quiet from the inhospitable city of New York to the delightful and fertile hills of New England, where the unwritten music of the fresh mountain breezes through the trees and the valleys and the sonorous peals of thunder succeeding the warm spring showers, of the rippling rills and meandering brooks of the robin and the wren, the bluebird and the sparrow, the peewit and the lark, and of all other minstrels of various feathered tribes, whose mellifluous strains may be heard from every tree, on either side of the pathway of the chattering squirrels leaping from branch. So this is what he started with when he's writing about his time here. And this is May 24th, 1844, just after the Hutchinson family singers come to town. Now we're lucky to have a lot in our wonderful Florence history. One of the Hutchinson family people write their memoirs. Did you all look at that? You must have looked at that. Is that right? I'm wondering if you saw this book. This is the notebook of the Hutchinson family singers. And to close, really, I just wanted to mention this because that's the inspiration for why we're here today, is their visit to the Northampton Association in April of 1844. They were recognized as the most prominent singing group and maybe even entertainers generally in the 1840s in America. And they were thorough abolitionists and even communards, like the people at the Northampton Association. They felt that they lived in a utopian community themselves. And so they loved being able to come here. And I just wanted to read a little bit from this, okay? Had a pleasant time at the community. When Zephaniah came, he went immediately to bed, and James Boyle gave him an emetic, which relieved him much. We, however, took a cruise around the farm first. Many questions were asked in regard to the management, etc. We had a game of bat ball, which we enjoyed. This is 1844, bat ball, which we enjoyed. And the field they likely played on is still there and is still a ball field. Then came the dinner, which was excellent and did us much good. After dinner, we had a sleeping spell. About 3:00 p.m., a rap at the door, and Frederick Douglass entered. Then came shaking hands, pulling and hauling, loud talking, laughing, embracing, etc. We had not seen Fred for nearly a year. He was in good health and full of anecdotes. And then Douglass goes down and gives a real barn raiser of a talk downtown, which was not taken kindly by the local press at all. And the communists, as they referred to themselves, came down there and went to the performance of the Hutchinson family singers downtown Northampton, and then went to Douglass's speech, where he probably was the occasion he had rocks thrown at him in Northampton. Okay, so I do see how I could go on. I want to give you a chance, my moderator, to rein me in.
Steve, thank you so much for sharing all that information. It's clear that there is a rich history in the Valley related to anti-slavery and to the activities that have gone on here. And I think that it's so important for people to know what role people played here. And I'm just personally excited and glad that there's an opportunity through the David Ruggles Center to learn more and to still engage to see how the history lives on today.
I just want to mention one little thing. I'd be remiss. We have annually we celebrate Basil Dorsey's birthday. He was a Ruggles assisted, formerly enslaved in Liberty, Maryland. And we'll have a walking tour on February 18th at 10 a.m. leaving from the Ruggles Center. And then the Ruggles Center will be an open house in the middle of winter for from noon to 2. So 10 for the walk and noon for the open house. Hope we can see you there. Bye.
That's great. Thanks, Steve. And that information I'm sure is on the website, which is linked in the chat.